The humid air of the Congolese jungle is thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. But on this day, another scent hangs in the air: fear. A scream rips through the canopy. It is not a call of play, nor a cry of warning. It is a sound of pure terror. Down below, in a clearing dappled with insufficient light, a male bonobo runs for his life. Researchers would know him as Zuri, a strong, high-ranking individual from the Kokoalongo community. But today, his strength means nothing. He is isolated. He is surrounded. The attackers move with a chilling silence that belies their species' reputation. They are not chimps, whose brutal border patrols are the stuff of primatological legend. They are bonobos, the hippie apes, the species that famously makes love, not war. Yet, this is not love. This is a hunt. 3 males from the rival Ekalakala group close in, their movements a fluid, terrifying ballet of violence. This is not a chaotic brawl. It is a coordinated assault, a tactic. One male lunges, grabbing Zuri's leg, pulling him off balance. Another slams into his side, teeth bared. Zuri fights back with the desperation of a cornered animal, but he is overwhelmed. For decades, science told us this was impossible. Bonobos resolved conflict with grooming, with play, with intricate socio-sexual behaviors that diffused tension before it could ever reach this point. They were our better angels, a peaceful counterpoint to the darker instincts of chimpanzees and ourselves. But the evidence, raw and undeniable, unfolds before the researchers' hidden cameras. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a fight over status that got out of hand. This is a calculated act of lethal aggression, an execution. As the attack reaches its brutal climax, one question hangs heavier than the jungle air. If the most peaceful primate on Earth is capable of this, what does that say about the nature of violence itself? To understand how the myth was shattered, we must first understand how it was built. Our story takes place here, in the Louis Cotel research site, a remote patch of rainforest deep within the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is the heart of bonobo territory, a world of staggering biodiversity, perpetually damp and shadowed by a triple-layer canopy that filters the equatorial sun into a dim, green-tinted light. For generations, this emerald kingdom has been a scientific sanctuary, a place to study one of humanity's 2 closest living relatives. For decades, the observations coming out of sites like this painted a consistent and remarkable picture. Bonobo society was a near utopia. Where chimpanzees have patriarchy, bonobos have matriarchy. Powerful, bonded females form the core of the community, and it is they who dictate the social rhythm. Males do not gain status through brute force alone. Their position is often inherited from their mothers. This matriarchal structure underpins everything. It creates a society where conflict is actively avoided. Primatologists like Frans de Waal built careers documenting their extraordinary methods for peacemaking. When tensions rise between individuals or groups, the bonobo response is not aggression, but affiliation. They engage in frantic bouts of grooming, they share food, and most famously, they use socio-sexual contact, from genital rubbing to passionate kissing, to diffuse anxiety and reinforce social bonds. It's a remarkable system, one that led to their popular image as the make love not war primate. In the Kokoalongo community, life followed this peaceful script. Our central figure, a mature male researcher called Zuri, was a product of this system. He was not the alpha, but he was high-ranking, respected, and socially savvy, skilled at navigating the complex female-led hierarchy. His days were spent foraging for the ripe figs and forest fruits that studded the canopy, resting in the heat of the day, and engaging in the constant, intricate dance of bonobo social life, playing with juveniles, grooming his mother, and presenting peacefully to the group's matriarch. Their world was one of apparent abundance, their lives governed by cooperation. They were living proof that another way was possible, a path away from the violence that seemed to define so many other primate societies. But nature is not a fable. And in the deep jungle, peace is a fragile commodity, always dependent on the delicate balance of resources, power, and pressure. A balance that was about to be irrevocably broken. The first sign of trouble was the silence of the forest. A long, punishing dry season had gripped the region, withering the fruit on the vine. The usual chorus of birds and insects seemed muted, and the bonobos themselves grew quiet. The easy abundance that fueled their peaceful society was dwindling. For the Kokoalongo and the neighboring Ekalakala communities, this scarcity created a new, dangerous dynamic. Their territories, which had always overlapped at the edges, became less a shared space and more a contested frontier. A prized patch of diallium trees, known for its nutrient-rich fruit, now sat directly on this frontier. In times of plenty, both groups would forage there, sometimes even interacting peacefully. Now, it was a prize to be won. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, who had monitored these groups for years, began to note a disturbing shift in their field journals. Encounters between the two groups became more frequent, and their character changed completely. The usual tentative, peaceful greetings were replaced by tense standoffs. The air, once filled with friendly pant grunts, now crackled with aggressive pant barks and piercing screams. The males, in particular, began to display more. They would charge through the undergrowth, dragging branches, their hair on end, a bluff, a show of force, designed to intimidate. But these bluffs were growing more serious. The ritual was failing. The peacemaking mechanisms were being ignored. A young, ambitious male in the Ekalakala group, let's call him Kovu, began to distinguish himself. He was physically impressive, but more importantly, he was a skilled social operator. Researchers observed him forming a tight coalition with two other males. They moved together, supported each other in disputes, and seemed to share a common purpose. This male coalition was a new and dangerous variable. In bonobo society, male alliances are typically weak and fleeting. This one was different. It was stable. It was focused. The first real confrontation occurred at the Diallium Grove. Zuri's group arrived to find Kovu's coalition already there, jealously guarding the trees. Instead of retreating or attempting a peaceful approach, the Kokoalongo females, driven by hunger, tried to press forward. Kovu and his allies responded instantly, not with a ritual display, but with a coordinated charge. They didn't make contact, but the message was unequivocal. This land is ours. The Kokoalongo group retreated, hungry and agitated. It was a victory for Kovu, a confirmation of his coalition's power. For the researchers, it was a chilling observation. The established rules of bonobo society were being rewritten in real time. The failure of de-escalation was a critical warning. The intricate social toolkit that had defined bonobos, their ability to subvert violence, was breaking down under ecological pressure. Alliances were hardening. The border was no longer a suggestion, it was a frontline. And for the first time in anyone's memory at Louis Cotel, the possibility of real violence, of something more than just a threat, began to feel terrifyingly real. Every war has a trigger, a single moment where the possibility of conflict becomes the certainty of it. For the bonobos of Louis Cotel, that moment arrived on a hot, breathless afternoon. Pushed by the needs of their infants and the growing desperation of the group, the matriarch of the Kokoalongo community made a fateful decision. She led a small foraging party, including Zuri, deep into the contested territory, further than they had dared to venture in weeks. They were looking for more than just fruit. They sought a rare, protein-rich herb that grew near a small stream, a vital resource for nursing mothers. Their trespass did not go unnoticed. Kovu's coalition had been patrolling the border with a discipline more reminiscent of chimpanzees. They weren't foraging, they were guarding. When they spotted the Kokoalongo party, the discovery was electric. From their perspective, this was not a desperate search for food. It was an invasion, an act of theft. What followed was not an immediate attack, but something far more unnerving. Kovu's group began to shadow them. They moved through the canopy, silent and unseen, their calls low and guttural. The Kokoalongo party grew nervous. The mothers clutched their infants closer. Zuri, trying to maintain calm, let out a series of what should have been reassuring grunts, but the response was a chorus of hostile barks from the trees above. The confrontation came at the stream. As the Kokoalongo females began to dig for the herbs, Kovu's coalition descended from the trees. The charge was explosive and terrifyingly precise. They bypassed the females, their focus absolute. Their target was Zuri. As a high-ranking male, he was the symbolic protector of the group. To break him was to break the Kokoalongo's will to resist. Zuri stood his ground, attempting a defensive display, but it was hopeless. The three males swarmed him. This was not the brief, chaotic clash of the past. It was a vicious, albeit short, beating. They bit and tore at his limbs before the Kokoalongo matriarch rallied her females, whose combined screams and desperate charges created enough chaos for Zuri to escape, injured and humiliated. The Kokoalongo fled back to their core territory. But the encounter had changed everything. A line had been crossed. Physical violence, direct and targeted, had been successfully deployed as a strategic tool. For Kovu's coalition, the lesson was clear: violence works. For Zuri, he was now a marked male. His attempt to defend his group had made him the focal point of the Ekalakala's aggression. The incident solidified the strategic calculus in Kovu's mind. To secure the territory for good, they didn't just need to intimidate their rivals. They needed to eliminate them. From that day on, the behavior of Kovu's coalition shifted from defensive to predatory. They began making deep, silent incursions into Kokoalongo territory. They were no longer just patrolling. They were probing. They were hunting. The final attack did not come in the heat of a territorial dispute. It came on a day like any other, which made it all the more terrifying. It was an ambush, meticulously planned and ruthlessly executed. Zuri was part of a small foraging party, just a few individuals from his Kokoalongo group. They had cautiously remained within their core territory, far from the contested border. They believed they were safe. They were wrong. Kovu's war party, 3 males, moving with the lethal stealth of leopards, had tracked them for over an hour. They used the dense undergrowth for cover, communicating with subtle gestures and low calls that were indistinguishable from the forest's ambient noise. The researchers observing them barely registered their presence until it was too late. The trap was sprung in a small clearing. One of Kovu's allies, the fastest of the 3, circled around and burst from the vegetation, cutting off the party's escape route back towards the main group. Panic erupted. The other bonobos scattered, screaming, climbing desperately for the safety of the high canopy. But Zuri was too slow. He was their sole objective. Kovu and the 3rd male burst from the opposite side of the clearing, closing the pincer. Zuri was trapped. The assault was immediate and overwhelmingly violent. There were no ritualized displays, no warnings. This was the culmination of weeks of rising tension, an explosion of calculated brutality. Kovu lunged for his head, biting deep into his shoulder to anchor him. The 2nd male attacked from behind, tearing at his back and legs. The 3rd, the one who had cut off his retreat, joined the fray, focusing on his hands and feet, systematically disabling him. Zuri fought with incredible courage, but he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. His cries of pain and terror were answered by the frantic, helpless screams of his family from the trees above. They could only watch. To intervene would be suicide. The attack was shockingly long. For over 10 minutes, the coalition relentlessly mauled him. This was not a quick kill. It was a methodical dismantling. They seemed to be driven by a cold fury, their actions purposeful. They were breaking him, piece by piece, ensuring he could never again be a threat. There was a moment, captured on the researcher's camera, where Zuri briefly broke free. He stumbled, trying to drag himself towards the trees, towards safety. But his legs were too badly injured. Kovu was on him in an instant, delivering a series of savage bites to his neck and abdomen. That was the turning point. Zuri's struggles weakened. His cries faded to agonized whimpers. Finally, he lay still. The attackers did not celebrate. There was no triumphant display. They simply ceased their assault, breathing heavily, their bodies slick with sweat and blood. For a moment, they stood over their victim, as if confirming the kill. Then, as silently as they had arrived, they melted back into the jungle, their mission accomplished. The immediate aftermath was a haunting silence. The frantic screaming from the canopy died down, replaced by low, mournful calls. After several long minutes, a few members of Zuri's group cautiously descended. His mother was among the first. Her reaction was profoundly moving, a testament to the deep social bonds that even this brutality could not erase. She approached the body, letting out a soft, whimpering call, and gently touched his face. There was no question. Zuri was dead. In the deep green cathedral of the Congo, a paradigm had been murdered alongside him. The death of a single bonobo sent shockwaves through the forest, altering the balance of power in ways that would last for years. In the days following the killing, the Kokoalongo community was a group in mourning, but also a group gripped by fear. They became withdrawn, almost ghostly in their movements. They abandoned a huge swath of their former territory, ceding the entire contested zone, including the resource-rich Dialium Grove, to their rivals without a fight. The war was over. The Ekolokala had won. For Kovu and his coalition, their strategy of lethal violence had been a resounding success. They had eliminated a key rival, terrorized their competition, and secured exclusive access to vital food resources. Their status within their own group soared. They were not ostracized for their actions, they were rewarded. They had delivered security and prosperity through overwhelming force. This outcome was a deeply unsettling revelation for the scientific community. It flew in the face of everything understood about bonobos. The field notes from the Louis Cotel researchers, published in the journal Current Biology, read like a dispatch from a shattered world. They documented the Kokoalongo's trauma, their heightened vigilance, their reluctance to travel, their muted social interactions. The joyful, peaceful society they had studied for years was now shadowed by post-traumatic stress. The event forced an uncomfortable comparison to their more infamous cousins. The Chimpanzee War of Gombe, documented by Jane Goodall in the 1970s, showed a similar pattern. A group of males systematically isolating and killing members of a rival community to expand territory. It was seen as a dark chapter in primate history, something that separated chimps from the more enlightened bonobos. But the massacre at Louis Cotel proved that this capacity for organized, lethal, intergroup violence was not unique to chimpanzees. It is a shared inheritance. A dark potential that lies dormant, waiting for the right pressures to awaken it. The implications were profound. It suggested that the behavioral differences between chimps and bonobos are not as absolute as once believed. They are not two different species on opposite ends of a moral spectrum. Rather, they are two species with a shared toolkit of behaviors, from the most gentle and empathetic to the most brutally violent. Which tools they use depends entirely on their environment, their social structure, and the pressures they face. The peaceful bonobo was not a myth, but it was only half the story. The other half, written in Zuri's blood, revealed a creature far more complex, and far more like us, than we had ever imagined. The killing of Zuri was more than a tragedy. It was a data point that shattered a scientific consensus. For decades, the prevailing theory was that bonobos had undergone a process of self-domestication. Like dogs bred for friendliness, bonobos had evolved to select for less aggressive traits. Their female-dominant society, abundant food sources in a stable environment, and unique use of sexuality for social bonding were all thought to have created an evolutionary path away from violence. Lethal aggression, especially the organized, coalitional killing seen in chimpanzees, was considered to be impossible for them. This single, well-documented event forced a complete re-evaluation. It demonstrated that the behavioral hardware for warfare, the ability to form strategic alliances, to coordinate an attack, to kill a rival for territorial gain, is present in the bonobo brain. It has not been bred out of them. It has simply been suppressed by their usual social and ecological conditions. When those conditions changed, when resources became scarce and competition intensified, the latent capacity for brutal violence emerged. This discovery adds a crucial, darker layer to the work of primatologists like Frans de Waal. His research brilliantly illuminated the empathetic and cooperative side of primates, coining the term prosocial behavior. But the Louis Cotel incident serves as a powerful reminder that prosociality and violence are not mutually exclusive. They are two sides of the same evolutionary coin. The same intelligence that allows for complex cooperation and empathy can also be used to plan a coordinated attack. This event, along with a handful of other recently documented cases of infanticide and severe aggression, suggests we have been looking at bonobos through a lens of romanticism. We wanted them to be the better angels of our nature. But nature doesn't deal in angels and demons. It deals in survival strategies. Peace is a strategy. War is also a strategy. The bonobos of Louis Cotel proved that their species is capable of deploying both. The question is no longer if bonobos can kill. The question now is what specific triggers push them across that line, and how often it has happened, unobserved, in the depths of the jungle. Years have passed since the massacre in the clearing. Life in the Louis Cotel forest has found a new, uneasy equilibrium. The Kokoalongo community survived, but they are forever changed, a group that has learned a hard lesson about the realities of their world. Kovu's coalition maintained its dominance for a time, a testament to the brutal effectiveness of their tactics. The border between them remains a line of tension, a memory etched into the landscape. The story of Zuri is not an aberration. It is a revelation. It teaches us that peace is not a permanent state of being, but a fragile condition, dependent on stability and abundance. It reveals that our closest relatives, both chimp and bonobo, are not simple caricatures of our own virtues and vices. They are complex beings, holding within them the full spectrum of behavior, from astonishing kindness to calculated cruelty. Their world is a mirror. In their capacity for empathy, we see the roots of our own compassion. In their intricate social politics, we see the origins of our own societies. And in their acts of shocking violence, we are forced to confront the deep, ancient origins of our own capacity for war. They are not monsters, nor are they saints. They are survivors, using every tool at their disposal in the timeless struggle for existence. The jungle keeps its secrets well. What we have witnessed is likely just a glimpse into a drama that has played out for millennia. As we continue to watch, we must do so with new eyes, stripped of our romantic notions, ready to accept the complex, and often terrifying, truth of what it means to be a primate on planet Earth. The peaceful ape is a beautiful idea. The complete ape is the reality.